Story 1. Worried Parent. Right now, I'm sitting up in my bed. It's late at night, and the only light is the screen of my laptop. I'm sure it's illuminating my face quite nicely. I just hope my poker face is convincing enough to whatever is watching me. I think as long as I don't seem scared or panicked, it should leave me alone. It may. She even leave the house completely? I can't be sure. Let me explain. It was approaching midnight when my wife, Mary, awoke. I was just about to drift into unconsciousness when she shook me awake. Well, is Jennifer home? She asked grudgingly. Our daughter Jennifer had gone out for some friends for drinks. It was Thursday, and she had work in the morning, so we both assumed she would have been back by now. I shook my head. My wife groaned in annoyance. She worried about Jennifer, as did I. We lived in a safe neighborhood, but people are unpredictable. Plus, you never know what can happen on the road. As a parent, your mind tends to automatically jump to the worst-case scenario. I'll see where she is. You go back to sleep, I whispered. As I pulled the blanket back over Mary, I grabbed my cell phone and began dialing Jennifer. After several rings, it went to voicemail. I hung up, letting my natural paternal instincts stir shreds of panic in my mind. Brushing it off, I began writing a text message. Hey, Jennifer, it's getting pretty late and Mom's worried. Any idea of your ETA? Jennifer is on the brink of turning 22. While that is still young in my eye, I understand that she is an adult. I do my best not to seem overbearing, but seeing as she's our only child, and a young woman in this crazy, depraved world, I can't help but worrying. For a few minutes, the screen remained unchanged. Finally, iMessage notified me that the message was read. The user is typing. Bubbles quickly followed. On my way back, should be home soon, she replied. I let out a sigh of relief. I figured since I was up, I might as well make a run to the bathroom. I kicked off the sheets and headed out the door. After finishing up my business, I began walking down our almost pitch-black hallway back my room. Bump! I ran into someone. I squinted and saw the long hair of the figure. That was quick, Jennifer. I didn't even hear you come in, I whispered. Silence. She must be exhausted, I thought. Good night, hon, I said as I moved past her and back to the comfort of my bed. I slipped head into my sheets and laid my head down. Just then I received a new text. Confused and annoyed, I sloppily stretched out for the phone. I grabbed it and opened the text. It was from Jennifer. I forgot my wall tea at the bar and had to drive all the way back to get it. I won't be back for another 20 minutes or so. That message was just sent a minute ago. I was frozen. I just saw Jennifer in the hallway, right? I slowly sat up in my bed and began calling Jennifer. She picked up, and I asked where she was. She reminded me that she had to go back to the bar and was still on her way home. I swallowed hard and told her to drive safe. After hanging up, the screen eventually went black. My eyes adjusted to the dark. That's when I saw her. Whoever I ran into in the hall was standing at our door, peering at me. Her hair was darker and longer than I first realized. Her eyes had an unnatural glow to them, and she flashed me a crazed smile. I managed to not flinch or make any sudden moves. I reached over to my laptop and popped it open. I don't know what to do. I can't explain why, but I'm almost paralyzed with fear. As long as I don't make it aware that I know she's not Jennifer, maybe she'll leave. I just want that thing to leave. Wait, I just heard something. The garage door is opening. Jennifer must be home. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. After I heard the garage open, I quickly looked up towards the strange woman. Our eyes met for the briefest moment. She broke her gaze and turned her head. She too heard the sound of the garage door. Without making a sound, she walked out of my sight in the direction of the stairs. For a moment, it felt like I had awoken from a nightmare. I had a sense of relief flush over me, as if everything that had just happened was just my imagination. Luckily, my paternal instinct kicked back into full gear as I leapt out of bed and to the door. I turned the corner and saw nothing. I dashed for the garage, slapping every light switch I passed in order to rid my house of darkness. I turned the last corner before colliding with another long-haired figure. I let out a short but aggressive yelp and jumped back, arms stretched out in front of me. "O.W. Dad, what the hell was that?" I heard my daughter ask from the ground. I had knocked her over. "Oh, Jennifer, it's just you," I breathed a sigh of relief. "Yeah, dude, who else were you expecting?" She got up and collected herself. I turned on every other remaining light and checked every corner of the house. Jennifer stood nearby, watching me in confusion. "Dee, what the heck is going on?" she finally asked. I eventually realized that woman was nowhere to be found. All the doors were locked, but there were a few windows opened. She must have come in and out that way. I locked them and went to hug my daughter. I just thought I heard something while I was sleeping. I lied. I figured there was no point in scaring her if the woman was gone. Jennifer hugged me back and laughed. We said good night and she headed upstairs. I decided I would look around for another few minutes just to ease my own mind. I was just about to call it quits when I heard Jennifer screaming for me from her bedroom. I dashed like a madman up the steps and burst through her door. She was at her window, frantically waving me over. I got to her side. My wife had awoken at this point and also entered the room. The three of us gathered at the window. In our backyard stood the woman with our porch light on. I was able to get a better look at her. Her hair was very long, almost to her waist. It was black and matted, with a couple of random braids and sloppy ponytails protruding in different directions. Her skin was pale. Blisters and sores covered her all over. She was wearing a black tank top and long black skirt. She was sporting the same psychotic smile as before. As soon as she saw me, her arm began to slowly rise up until she was pointing at me. Her smile grew into an open-mouthed grin. I saw she missing several teeth, and teeth she still had were yellow and rotten. My wife was watching in shock and terror. Her mouth was wide open, and she covered it with one hand. She eventually turned to me and loudly asked, "Who the hell is that?" I looked at her and told her I didn't know. "Guys," whimpered Jennifer. We both turned to her and she was still staring out the window. Her former look of awe and borderline amusement was replaced with absolute dread. I looked back at the woman in our backyard. She was still pointing But now it was at Jennifer. Her grin was overtaken by a grimace. Her eyes were squinted in rage. She began screaming in short, high-pitched bursts. Jennifer was covering her mouth in shock. We were all speechless and unsure what to do. Due to all the screaming, our neighbors' lights began to turn on one by one before they came out. Investigate the source of the commotion. When the crazed lady saw all her new spectators, she quieted down. With one last menacing gaze to my daughter, she turned around and ran into the darkness. I grabbed Jennifer, who was now in tears, and hugged her. A few minutes later we heard a knock at the door. It was the police. They had been called by one of the neighbors, I assume. We explained what had happened in the backyard. I pulled one of the officers aside and told him that she had even gotten in a house, but was hoping to not let the other to know. He looked at me in shock and agreed to look around the house. Of course, he couldn't find any obvious entry point and, like me, blamed it on an open window. He told me he would stay outside the use for a couple hours with his partner, which put us all at ease. That was the end of it. I know it's cliché, but I can't help but think this isn't over. That woman knows where we live. She was able to find a silent and discreet way to enter the house, despite her obvious insanity. I'm scared for my family. I'm scared for myself. My daughter already carries mace and a small knife, as I said. I worry about her, so I make sure she is ready to defend herself. But I went ahead and also bought her a small taser, one for my wife, too. I really hope this is the end of it. Story 2. String theory. Have you ever had an experience that suggested someone else was in your house and just thought, I don't want to know, and left it? Sometimes fear of the unknown just seems like a preferable option than facing a real, concrete danger. Normally it's nothing, though. One time the beeper function of my wireless house phone went off when I was the only one home. It could only be called from the living room. Another time, I swear someone took some change from my desk. They're all probably just slightly disconcerting tricks of the memory. But what would you do when something truly suggestive happens? Would you run or just ignore it, like I did? Last Monday was a normal day. I got up, brushed my teeth, changed into school clothes, all little parts of my morning ritual. It seemed like it would be another totally unnoteworthy day, until I saw the strings. There were 3 or 4 thick twine strings in my room. They crisscrossed between the walls around my bed, one attached to the door. No way would I have missed them before. I should have tripped over them. They were tied to pins in the walls, which had also not existed before 10 seconds ago. Nobody could have been in my room while I was in it, let alone set this up. It was early, and my brain wasn't processing correctly. I simply dazed the sight, and tied the strings and left for school, leaving them balled up on my desk. It didn't get any better later. Outside my house, there were hundreds of them, tied between houses, around cars, across streets. This had to be some super elaborate prank, one of those hidden camera shows, or a comedy improv blog. They had gotten everyone else to play along too. Passerbys were tangled in them, tying them to objects they were walking towards and away from, as if they had been and were continuing to follow the course laid out for them. I nervously continued my journey to school. On the bus, Every except me was tied to the door. At school, groups of friends were tied to each other. Teachers were tied to their desks and boards. Oddly enough, at this point all I could wonder was why I had been left out when my friend Lucy sat beside me in first period. She simply plunked her bag down on my lap and rested her chin in her hand, looking right past me to the window outside. "Hey, Lucy." No response. "Come on, I didn't expect you to be in on this too." She sighed and started taking books from her bag. All the books were tied to her hands. I grinned and yanked one of the strings off a book. She didn't seem to notice, instead simply disregarding the book, completely letting it drop to the floor without a moment's hesitation. I leaned down, picking up her book and placing it back on her desk. She took no notice. "Well, if that's how we're gonna play it," I smiled, trying to look playful, but really just trying to hide my nervousness. I bundled all the strings attached to her together with one hand, then pulled them all free. She blinked, turning to stare at me. "Holy crap, Martin. You're like a ninja or something." "I've been sitting here for maybe 10 minutes. I smiled again, relieved my friend had finally noticed. "Emmy, where did all these strings come from?" She gasped, seemingly noticing for the first time. "I assumed you were all fucking with me." She stood up, backing into a corner. No one else in the class noticed. "They weren't here just a minute ago. Do you see them too?" Her tone made it clear she was genuinely scared. "No, didn't you?" I was interrupted by my teacher slamming the door behind her. Everyone except me and Lucy murmured a good morning, and still no one seemed to pay either of us any notice. "People have been ignoring me all day," I said to Lucy, before turning to our teacher. "Hey, dumb bitch. You can't teach for shit." No reaction. "I'm getting away from all this shit." Lucy pulled a few strings aside and left the class. I followed, and surprise, surprise, no one else noticed. We wandered the corridors, leaving and entering classes as we saw fit. Whenever we untied a chair or book from someone else, it was like it suddenly didn't matter to them. It didn't exist. I showed her the street outside. There were more strings than when I came in this morning, twice as many. We carefully seeked our way through the tangle, making our way to a nearby coffee shop. Not particularly grand, I know. But what would you do in our situation? As I said, fear of the unknown sometimes seems like a fair option. On a few occasions I suggested we untie a few more people. Lucy was opposed to it, remembering how terrified she'd been. In the coffee shop, we grabbed a couple of sandwiches and drinks from the fridge. We found a table, untied all strings attached to the chairs, and sat down. We both ate in silence, both of us too scared, both of us distracting ourselves by watching the strangers in the shop, oblivious to the strings. After 20 minutes, Lucy spoke up. "Nah, she's gonna take that sandwich," she said, pointing at a woman across the shop. "Sure, no." She walked to the fridge and took the plastic wrap sandwich. She was tied, too. "She pays for it and leaves." She did so according to the prophecies of the strings. "That guy doesn't intend to pay." I watched as a man took his coffee and ran out of the store, the two servers just looking too exasperated to go after him. "This is horrible," she whimpered. "Let's go, please." Outside wasn't much better. Everyone just followed the string's instructions, going about their daily lives. Lucy announced she was going home to sleep this off, and I agreed to walk her home. She only lived 10 minutes away from the busier part of town. There were fewer strings. It was nicer. We could pretend it wasn't happening. When we turned onto Lucy's street, she stopped, her mouth falling open. "What now?" I broke the silence, my voice sounding surprisingly small. "Look." She pointed outside one of her neighbor's houses. I saw it clearly, and I'll take my memory of that moment till the day I die. A little dark imp, maybe 3 feet tall, walking along with its knuckles on the ground, almost like a monkey. It had the bulbous yellow eyes taking up about half its face, and no mouth or any other facial features. It was holding a hammer and a ball of twine, which it was letting out behind it. It walked quickly and quietly from the front door of the house to the mailbox. It stopped, hammered a nail into the side of the box, and tied its string around it. It turned to face us and stopped when it spotted us. My bottom fell out even further than it had already been, but it just stared with a look of surprise and curiosity. You could almost say it was the more frightened one. Suddenly it beckoned to us with its tiny hand. I looked at Lucy. She had an T moved. I looked back at the imp, which stared at me. I have the distance between us, and then halved it again. This wasn't fear of the unknown anymore. It was fear of this little guy. Didn't T seem like anything to be scared of. When I was a meter away from it, it extended its hand. I shook it. It nodded in approval, blinking its massive yellow eyes up at me. "So you're the ones in charge of the strings?" It nodded eagerly. I called Lucy over, but she stayed where she was. "There are more of you." Another nod. I wanted to ask it so many questions about what it was and where it came from, but it seemed for now I was stuck with only yes or no questions. Do we even have free will? It just looked at me, almost sadly. I immediately felt sick to my stomach and couldn't bear looking at the little monster anymore. I grabbed Lucy, who'd been listening to our exchange, and now sat on the curb with her head in her hands. "Come on," we entered her house, and I made her a cup of tea. When I found her in the living room, she had untied her dog and was curled up with it, crying. I set the tea down and sat beside her. "I'm so scared," she whispered after a good 10 minutes of sobbing. I didn't answer. I couldn't. "I'm going to sleep," she mumbled suddenly, and was under within the minute. Sleep was starting to sound pretty good all of a sudden. My eyelids suddenly felt like they were being weighed down. I collapsed to the rug, and the last thing I heard before I fell asleep was the scurrying of several sets of little feet nearby. I felt much better the next day, as if the whole affair had been a dream. I'd probably have believed that if I hadn't been awoken by Lucy's mother that morning, wondering what I was doing, sleeping over without permission or something, over breakfast. Lucy asked me why I looked so pale and nervous. I turned to her and smiled, mumbling something to her about feeling sick. But the truth was, I was scared because I couldn't see any strings, and was wondering whether my actions were truly my own. Story 3. The ticking of the clock. There are no clocks in hell, only an eternal ticking. Brit he walked inside, a man's man, home from a hard day of labor, in no mood for sass or foolishness, brutal discipline at the ready, silence dominating, save the ticking of the clock. According to their training, his family sat still, remained obedient, and as the pendulum moved within the table clock's dark cherry body, his fingers running over the oily, smooth surface, the tick-tock sound echoing throughout the cabin, he needed only a nod to impart his command. She sat at the dinner table, her back to her husband. Affection was beaten out her long ago, and she did not dare to greet him with fine china set properly before her, a thick layer of dust covering it. She mumbled and laughed at early 50s game show playing through her mind, her delusional part that of a cheery contestant. Not that she would have known if it was, but the command was not for her, nor was it for his eldest son sitting at the other end of the table, carving his arm with a dinner knife. Blood rolled to the stained table cloth below, his eyes twitching and his lips tightening with every stroke of the blade. His daughter, such a gorgeous young girl, the body of a woman blossoming around her 14-year-old mind, reacted with haste. She sprung up from the couch and disappeared into the kitchen. She returned with an ice-cold bottle of beer, walking past the little boy sitting in the corner, playing with his only toy, a small bean-bag, over and over again, tossing it high, catching it midair. The man said nothing as he took the beer. His daughter sitting down next to him. After quenching his thirst, he put the bottle down, turned toward his daughter, and she turned her back to him, just as he wanted. Her hair was so soft, long and leg, H.T. Brown, smelling of lilac and femininity, and he ran his fingers through it. The ticking of the clock remained constant, but perhaps grew louder, more imposing with every turn of the interlocking mechanisms that made up its inner workings, grating on nerves, invading the deepest recesses of the mind, soothing and disturbing all at once. A toss of the bean-bag high in the air, a gleeful gasp from the contestant, a deep cut into a previous scar, eyes closed tight as her mind went away, the man moving from silky smooth hair to creamy smooth skin, caressing her shoulders, kissing her neck. The little boy threw the bean-bag higher into the air. Each time when he plucked it from its fall, a cascading rush of noise broke the silence, and the man's concentration. Be silent, et boy, or I will butcher you and feed you to them for supper. Holding his bean-bag tight, the little boy bowed his head, looking away from his father. The man turned back to his daughter and put his hands down into her shirt, his fingers moving underneath the straps of her undergarments. The ticking of the clock was now more piercing, its rhythm irresistible, hand completely invasive. Light from oil lamps aired off of the face of the clock, the arms unnaturally moving counterclockwise and then back again. The little boy squeezed the bean-bag close to him, the contestant shaking her head in disbelief. She won. She won, the knife now buried halfway into arm meat, the man pinching nipples while lapping her face with his tongue. The threat of violence was forgotten by the little boy. He stood up and tossed the bean-bag once more into the air. Taking a step forward, he lunged to catch the bean-bag. He stood still and looked at his father, gauging whether or not the man noticed him. He had not. The little boy pushed his lock. The bean-bag was launched from his hand, but it was too strong, and it hurtled through the room, striking his father on the head. The man was furious. He stood up and removed the thick leather belt from his pants. Petrified, the little boy did not move while the man walked toward him. The eldest son slammed the knife into the table and screamed. His father changed direction and ran to the table. A crushing backhand knocking the boy across the room. Another backhand cleared the china from the tea table, and it crashed to the floor, a million pieces playing in a shattering symphony. Inspired by the macabre concerto, his wife began to sing jaunty show tune. The ticking of the clock was relentless now, deep black anger resounding throughout the house. Madness vibrated through their minds with every tick. With every talk, fear pulled them farther into the abyss. Shadows danced in. Nearby, excited specters of the oil lamp lights. Evil joy exploding in celebration. The man whipped the little boy, blood squirting from his face at first, and then his back after he fell to he floor. Over and over he scourged his son, thick red liquid splashing him, rolling down the walls. A scream came from behind the man, and he turned to find the barrel of a shotgun pointed at his face. Tears pooled in his eldest son's eyes. The man smirked and gave the boy a chance to show some balls, but he was a castrated disappointment. After taking the shotgun from his eldest son, the man issued him a butt-stoke. Several teeth bounced off of the floor just before his son's head did. The little boy ran over to the couch and picked up his beanbag. The woman sang, she with tragic gusto, her success in opera bringing her fame and fortune. The young girl sat naked on the couch, waiting to perform her nightly duty. The man pulled the trigger, splattering his eldest son's brains all over the house. The ticking of the clock sounded like laughter now, whining and screeching, high-pitched insanity shaking the walls. The shadows moving around the clock, triumphant, jubilant. The man stepped over his dead eldest, stripping the clothes from his body, making his way to the couch. Almost imperceptible, but audible nonetheless, the cascade of the beans preceded he strike that followed square in the middle of his back. The man turned around and grabbed the beanbag from the ground. The little boy ran through the cabin, trying to get away, catching the movem. ENT from the corner of his eye, the man whirled around and threw the beanbag at his last remaining son. As the beanbag struck the little boy in the head, the beans now weighing hundreds of pounds, each one of them, blood erupted from the crushed crater in his skull. The lifeless boy's body careened into an end table, toppling it over. Unholy shadows streaked across the room as the oil lamp that sat upon the table fell, collided with the hardwood floor, and devoured everything nearby in a ferocious explosion. Flames raced throughout the cabin, helped along by dancing demons yearning for the family to join them for all eternity. The man lost his appetite for young female excitement and ran to the front door. He took hold of the door handle and screamed when his flesh melted onto it. He pulled and pushed and kicked, but the door would not open. He smashed his fists into the smoldering wood, smashed them until they were nothing but bloody pulp. The sea island broke apart, fire falling in on him from above. A support beam fell and crushed him, his neck twisting completely around the clock, his final sight. And the ticking of the clock was the last sound he heard before the demons welcomed him to hell. The fire was brilliant, visible from miles away. There was no point in trying to alert the fire department. It would have taken almost an hour or any response to such a desolate place. Not that he would have called for help anyway. By the time he arrived, the cabin was little more than a smoldering pile of ash, load-bearing Sioux. Port beams jutted up from the ground. Smoke pouring off of them like jagged, cockeyed chimneys. He parked his car and got out, purposely walking on the family name placard that had wafted onto the driveway, stepping on the family name of whom he despised. Walking through the embers, he made his way to the former center of the house. A smile played across his face. He found it standing upright, not a mark on it, the pendulum swinging, and the mechanisms gracefully catching the ticking of the clock, soft and inviting. He picked it up from the ground. Heat did not transfer its body to his skin. No, instead the clock's dark, cherry body felt cold to the touch, oily and smooth. He dusted the ash from it and turned it over, also dusting the bottom to reveal the engraving, a large circle of intertwined serpents, an inverted triangular star, the inlay adorned with a demonic angel on either side of the pentagram. Above the carvings, a beautifully inscribed warning, Te delias quam alios de te suaviest fieri tactos. He laughed at his wit. They had been too stupid to decipher his humor. He told Harrison that he would get the last laugh. He told them all, but they didn't listen. They should have learned from what happened to the others. But no, they just ridiculed him, beat him up, broke his jaw, made a mockery of him. Well, they were he ones who were suffering now, and he was the one ridiculing them. As he walked back to the drive, he took inventory. 3 down, 1 more to go. His revenge was almost complete, and nothing would stop him. It was, after all, just a matter of time. Story 4. Last of the Sparks. Back in February of 2008, I decided that I needed a change in my monotonous life. Whether that change would come in the form of a new job or a new toothbrush, I didn't know. I was never the most adventurous person. I've always found it difficult to veer away from my comfort zone, and the limit of my existence usually depended upon which book I was reading. At the time, it took me a while to realize that my happiness often derived from the stories that my mind was living in. I was an avid bookworm, as miserable a synecdoche as that is. Once I realized my true outlet, I immediately knew what I wanted. I purchased a small shop, quit my boring job, renovated the building, and transformed it into a bookstore. I had never been happier. The next 2 years were the best of my life. The store had become a huge hit with the locals. My perspective on work had been completely altered, and I was feeling genuinely happy for the first time since my childhood. It was during the winter of 2010 that she walked into my store. She stepped inside out of the snow and approached me with a large bin bag. Hatchings of age covered her pale face and hands. She must have been at least 80 years old. Slamming the bag on the counter, she simply said, "These are full. Are you?" I looked inside the bag to find a selection of some of the greatest novels ever written. "Why? Do you want money for these, or some kind of book trade?" I asked confusingly. "No, you're yours to have. Take them." She gave me a feeling of uneasiness. Her dirty gray friend slightly concealed her face as a cold gaze met my vision. "Are you sure you want me to have them? Wouldn't you rather sell them?" "No, I have no use for them, nor for money." "Okay. Thank you. What's your name?" "Lucy." She muttered her final words and left my store. I found it all too strange that somebody would give away such great books for nothing, but I suppose some people are just nice. I made my way home at night and took the books with me so that I could go through them. I piled tea, him up on the table, and was surprised to see that all of them were in fantastic condition. A couple of them seemed to be first editions, and others were versions that I had never even seen before. It took me a moment to realize that the novels that I was looking at were not as I had remembered them to be. The first book that I picked up was The Green Mile. On the front cover, there was an image of John Coffey smiling and holding to dead, naked girls. I opened it up and flicked through the pages. In this version of the novel, he was in fact guilty of the rape and murder of Bot H. children. I made my way to the end of the book and read through the execution scene. All of the officers who had originally grown to love John Coffey in the original novel were now laughing uncontrollably and screaming racial taunts as he was being executed. My eyes had seen enough, and my stomach had felt enough too. The next book I picked up was The Catcher in the Rye. The artwork upon the front page seemed to be of a dead body splattered on the street, drawn from an aerial view. I flicked through the book until I reached chapter 14. After Holden Caulfield speaks of messing with tea, the idea of suicide, he suddenly breaks down in tears and jumps from the window, cracking his skull on the pavement below. The book abruptly ended. After that, I then picked up Lord of the Flies. The defining image on this novel was of a large child with the face of a pig. He was covered in blood and surrounded by decaying corpses. After grazing through the pages, I reached a point of the story in which Piggy is described as being non-human, vicious, and a hungry animal. A chapter or so later, Jack insults Piggy, which leads to him losing his temper and ripping him apart. Piggy and proceeds to kill and eat the rest of children. The remainder of the book was the same line repeated over and over. Piggy sat alone on the island, waiting for death. I read through the few books that were left in the pile, and they had all been changed in some sick way. The Great Gatsby, Wuthering Heights, To Kill a Mockingbird, Ulysses, every one of them. Just as I reached the bottom of the pile, I noticed that the final book was one that I had never even heard of before. It was called Last of the Sparks. I found this slightly unnerving, as I immediately paired it with my name, on Sparks. Still, it was just a book. The front cover was of 6 gravestones, with words too small to be read etched into the granite. I looked up into the top corner of the book and noticed that there was a sell-by date on it, the 4th of June 2013. I nervously opened it up to the beginning of the story. Chapter 1. Alice Sparks. My stomach dropped as I read my mother's name upon the page. I felt dizzy and confused as I anxiously made my way through the chapter. It seemed to detail a regular day in the life of the character, until I reached the last page. Alice was crossing of the road when the heel of her shoe broke, causing her to fall. She didn't get to her feet fast enough, and a speeding driver struck her, puncturing both of her lungs. I felt sick to my stomach. I put the book down and got straight into bed, hoping for some sleep. I lay awake all night as countless questions ran through my mind. The only thought that managed to put me to sleep was, it's just a book. The next morning when I got into work, I was feeling worse for wear. It wasn't until around lunchtime that I began to perk up and regain a bit of energy. Then the phone rang. I answered the call to my father crying on the other end. I immediately knew what had happened. I closed the shop and ran to the hospital. but it was already too late. She was gone. Hit by SP, eating driver, they said. I spent the next couple of weeks helping take care of my dad. Me, my brother, and my sister stayed with him in turns and looked after him. We all looked after each other. It wasn't until a few months later that I picked up last of the Sparks. It had just scared me so much the last time. I opened it up to page 37, and there it was, Chapter 2. Patrick Sparks, THI's story was more of the same, a day in the life, right up until the part in which he shot himself in the kitchen whilst on the phone to his son. I ran to the phone to speak to him, comfort him, but then I realized what I may be doing. The phone picked up at the other end, and before I could say a word, he was gone. I got my black suit and tie out once more and repeated the same process for another parent. It ruined us all. After the funeral, I refused to touch the book. What if I had been causing these deaths by reading it? I couldn't go through it all again. But on Christmas Eve of 2011, I got a phone call from my brother's wife, Heather. Will had been putting up Christmas lights on the roof when he slipped on ice and broke his neck. He died almost instantly. Re the phone at the wall and began to sob into my sleeve. Anger took the pain away for a moment as I picked up the book and read through chapter 3. It was exactly as Heather had described. I fell asleep and woke up the next day with the book still on my lap. I decided to check who was going to go next out of me and my sisters and hopefully warn them. Tore myself. In some way I turned the page. Chapter for Mary and Sarah Sparks. I rushed through the story as fast as I could until I reached the end. Both of my sisters and their partners would drown in a lake after colliding with another car in a one-way bridge. That same sickly feeling took over me. I met with my sisters later that day to exchange gifts, and I told them as calmly as I could muster to be careful when driving. I had to sound as sane as possible, mentioning the lake, the bridge, and the fact that all four of them would be in the car at the same time. But at least I told them. Mary and Sarah drowned months later in August 2012. After I went to the funeral, I picked up the book and turned to the final pages, Chapter 5, Aaron Sparks. But I didn't read it. I'd rather not live in fear for so long, so I decided to save it for nearer the time. After all, there was a sell-by date on it for a reason. Everything has been normal for the past 5 months or so, although I've lost interest in reacting, so I'm back to my old miserable self. I questioned myself every day as to why she was doing this to me. But it didn't matter. It was all going to be over soon anyway. I've just finished reading the final chapter. It's the 4th of June 2013, and I'm sitting in my basement waiting for her to arrive. That's the way the ending goes. Or so I've read. Story 5, a dream analysis. There's a reoccurring dream I've had for times now. It always starts the exact same, but ends differently. The main part of the dream goes as follows. I'm walking along a sidewalk by a speedway near my old neighborhood with homes on the left-hand side and businesses on the right. It's pitch black and not a single car passes by. Where I'm walking to is unclear. On the opposite side of the speedway walks a skin-NY man dressed completely in black with a hoodie. He turns his head at me while still walking, and it's clear that he's wearing a white latex mask. I suddenly become uneasy. Becca, he doesn't look like someone I'd want to meet, especially at night, and he's aware of my presence. At this point, I decide it's best that I turn around and go back to my old house. I stop walking, and the strange man turns away and continues moving forward. To my relief, I stand there for a few seconds until the man is far off in the distance. Then I turn around and walk back to my home. Suddenly, I hear footsteps from behind me. I look out the corner of my eye and see that the man is following me and getting very close. My heart begins to pound, and I quicken my pace, wondering how he got behind me so fast when he was so far away from me on the other side of the street just a second ago. After a few moments of panic, I decide it's time to face this person and see how much danger I'm really in. I turn around to find a young boy, probably middle school age, wearing a backpack. Surprised, I say hi to the boy, which he says in return, then walks ahead of me towards a small house with its door opened. An eerie blue light shimmers from the opening. Before going inside, the boy looks back at me and invites me in. I politely refuse, then continue on my way through darkness. As I get further away from the boy's house, it quickly becomes apparent that the blue light is the only light source that can be seen. But I trudge onward. My destination is the home I had grown up in, so finding my way through the dark shouldn't be a problem. I take a left up a short hill, then a right across a street, knowing my house is just around the corner. After another hill, I'm sure I've found my home, but I soon realize that I'm wrong. I don't see my house anywhere, and there are no lights on in the entire neighborhood. Unsure of what to do and getting freaked out, I start running, going as fast as I can, and I would never stop till I found my house in the dark maze I was in. That's where the first dream in this series ends. The second dream goes the same way right up until the part where the boy invites me into his house. This time I agree to go inside and get to know him. When I enter the house, I find that the blue light had been coming from a TV screen the whole time, with a Sonic the Hedgehog game being played by his younger brother. I'm instantly greeted by his mother, and his father is in the kitchen making popcorn. While the inside of the house isn't very spacious, it still looks cozy with a long, comfortable couch and a recliner in the living room. Without really talking much to the family, I sit down to play my favorite game from back in the day. I play against my new friend and then with his brother. After a while, the family starts to seem a little too friendly, and an uneasy feeling creeps over me. Things get even more uneasy when the loving mother of the family brings out a plate with cigarettes piled on top and passes them around to her kids. The kids are way below the legal smoking age, but the mother lights up their cigarettes for them anyway, and they begin smoking with delight. Even as an adult, smoking is something I've never been too fond of, but I take a cigarette anyway, as to not be rude. Once finished, I thank the family for their generosity and get up to leave. The last thing I remember is the mother arranging candles on a table and lighting them. In the third dream, I enter the house and play Sonic the Hedgehog just like before, but the part with the cigarettes doesn't happen. However, the scene with the candles does, and the father stands in front of the TV, holding a book with an upside-down cross on the cover. He opens the book and begins reading passages in a very dark tone. The next thing I know, the four family members start hovering a couple inches off the ground. They float around the entire house, and the younger brother floats up a short flight of stairs to his bedroom, laughing as he does so. Meanwhile, I'm still sitting on the couch watching all of this, and I'm paralyzed with terror. Even though they were all smiling and having fun with their powers, I was too afraid to move. My fear of what they might do to me kept me from trying to escape, and I awoke from that dream screaming. For the fourth and final dream so far, the family didn't smoke cigarettes or hover in the air like before. Instead, they all sat together on their couch, staring at a blank screen and not speaking or even moving. I was standing up, looking in horror at the man in the latex mask sitting inside the cozy house on the recliner, holding a shiny combat knife. Before I woke up, all I saw after that was darkness, followed by the family members screaming as they were being stabbed repeatedly by the men I had encountered in dream number 1. Now for the dream analysis. A doctor, whose name I can't reveal at this time, was able to make me realize that the man in the latex mask is me. The boy I meet on the sidewalk is Stephen Cheney, my old friend. His mother is Megan, Father Lewis, and Brother Morgan. In all for dreams, I take on the role of my younger self, and the Haler is the person I would later become. On August 13th, 1996, I killed the Cheney family. I've been in prison for a long time, and after 10 years I developed amnesia and simply forgot about that incident. It wasn't till I started having these dreams that everything came back to me. Before you decide that you hate me, hear me out first. The ability to float in the air was just one of the many things the Cheney family were capable of. They weren't possessed by spirits. They were just evil incarnate. They could move objects and operate electronics with their minds whole deaf, limbs without getting burnt. And they practiced sacrifice and got away with it. I remember hanging out with Stephen all through middle school and most of high school, always at his house. His family seemed so nice, but through all those years, he had been giving me little hints that they were gifted. It was on the last day he hung out that they revealed their flying powers, and I never spoke to him again after that night. Although too afraid to ever go back, I would go out at night on missions to spy on them. It was on these missions that I witnessed the horrible things I mentioned earlier. A couple years went by with me doing nothing about this evil presence that lived so close to my house with my loving parents. I tried to put it out of my mind and went forward with my plan of going to college and living in a dorm room. While in college, I spent a lot of my time in the library reading about the occult. What I read confirmed what I saw on them. Why spying missions and action had to be taken. I couldn't go to the police. I knew I had to go it alone. On August 13th, I drove my fairly new car back to my old neighborhood stay the night at my parents' house. When they had fallen asleep that night, I snuck out wearing a hoodie and a latex mask and made my way towards the Cheney house. I cut their power, then crept in through their unlocked back door to find them standing in their living room in confusion. I rushed at them with a knife my dad had kept from his days in the military, and I was able to kill them all, starting with the father and ending with my old friend Stephen. I savored their death screams, and when it was over and I was walking back home, That's when the cops came. The screaming of those demonic bastards had been loud enough for the police to show up, and two of them tackled me to the ground and threw me in their squad car before I could run home. My crime was all over the news the next day. Why? People called me disturbed and maniacal and crazy. No one would believe that I had saved an entire neighborhood from evil forces. Instead of a simple thank you, I got life in prison. Well, since it's almost time for my medication, I'll end this with a word of caution. Only trust those closest to you. Don't just assume that most people are normal and good-natured. There are beings living amongst us that take the forms of average-looking, friendly people, and should they choose, they will harm you. If you suspect that there's something off about a seemingly normal person, remember my story 6, the psychic knock. Game, you get a group of you together, and if you all focus hard enough, you can knock on someone's door with your collective psychic energy. Josh explained to Martin, Tony, and I in school on Monday. We noticed that there was a bit more to it than that when he actually showed us the snaps, each one a picture of handwritten instructio. NS, you need a large group of people who are connected in some way. Friends, teammates, or classmates works well. You must all agree on whose door to knock on. If there's any disagreement in the group, the game will not work. Everyone must wear black. The group must sit in a circle and join hands. The leader caller in the group must place a picture of the door, a map showing the route from the group to the door's location, and something belonging to the person to receive the psychic knock in the center of the circle. There must be complete silence. The group must concentrate on the map and visualize moving to the door one at a time, starting with the person sat to the left of the caller. When you reach the door, squeeze the hand of your neighbor to the left. Only when the caller gets to the house can you begin to focus on the knock. The group, except for the caller, must raise their right hand, concentrate on the door, and visualize the caller's hand raised and knocking. The caller must also visualize the knock. The psychic energy of the group will be channeled into the caller's right hand, and it will raise of its own accord and knock. We didn't know how many people we needed, so it started as a few close friends, but word soon got out. Josh invited Kayla because he wanted to make out with her. Kayla wanted to bring Abby, the biggest loudmouth in the school. So by Thursday morning, we had 14 people coming. We picked our chemistry teacher, Mr. Griffiths. He lived quite close to me, so it was easy enough to take a picture of his door and steal a little garden gnome he had at the front of his house. Everything was set, and then disaster struck. My mom got asked to cover a shift at W.O.C. We really needed the money, so she couldn't say no. Because of this, I had to stay home and look after my little sister Joni. So while Josh, Tony, and Martin were having fun hanging out with the hottest girls in our class and trying to psychically bother our teacher, I was stuck at home with a 9-year-old brat. Once I'd packed her off to bed, I jumped on my laptop and Skyped Josh. It was 10 p.m. Hey man, this is awesome. Kayla and all the girls came, he said. It sucks that you can't be here. I know, man. When are you going to start? Stroke of midnight. Dude, Loke, stay on the line, but we are going to have to put you on mute when the time comes. the instructions say complete silence. I hung out with them for a couple of hours via Skype and watched them get red. Why, in Josh's basement den, they were all dressed in black, and Josh lit a bunch of candles around the room that cast an eerie, flickering light. When he turned off the lights, the soft, low candlelight made the images on the screen pixelated and indistinct. "Sorry, dude, we're putting you on silent," Josh said and hit mute. At this point I could hear them, but they couldn't hear me. They formed into a circle, cross-legged on the floor. Josh was reveling in his role as caller, dishing out instructions and trying to act cool. There was whispering and nodding. Then when they pulled out the map, an object to put in the middle of the circle, they broke out in giggles, and a few of them shot glances to the screen to look at me. I couldn't make out the images clearly, but it didn't look like Mr. Griffith's gnome. It looked more like a sweater, my sweater. That was when it hit me. They were going to knock on my door. "You sons of bitch," I shouted, usual, sly into the muted Skype call. There was nothing I could do. They were in the circle now, completely focused. I watched, powerless to intervene. I couldn't see the hand squeezes as the members of the circle passed the psychic baton to each other, but I could somehow sense it. I felt the energy building from one person to the next. The candle light grew dimmer, drawing all attention into the circle, blocking out the rest of the room, the rest of the world. The light flickered wildly as each hand was squeezed tight, and then the energy passed. Despite the silence in the room, a distant rumbling, grating noise grew over our connection. It hurt my ears. I wanted to scream at them to stop, but found myself entranced by the events unfolding on my screen. The energy passed to Josh, and the group broke hands. They raised them in unison. Josh's hands remained rested on his knees, his face impassive, eyes narrowed. They knocked 3 times, slowly and deliberately, impossibly. A deep reverberation built over the Skype connection, so that by the end of the 3rd knock, the booming noise echoed into the pits of infinity. It's hard to describe everything that happened in those next few moments. Josh's hand shot up. For a fraction of a second he stared at it, a terrified look on his face. In an instant, the look was gone. As his eyes rolled back in his head, only the whites now staring vacantly out. The flickering candle light transformed the shadow of his raised hand from a teenage boy's into that of a gnarled and twisted fiend. I don't know if I actually saw it or imagined it after the fact, but for less than a heartbeat I thought I saw the terrible creature who owned that hand etched in shadow on wall and my screen. A sound came over the speakers, full of dread, malice, and glee. It was at once a scream, a roar, and, most terrifying of all, the word "yes," the circle moo. Hasty have heard it as well, for they clutched their hands to their ears, faces writhing in agony, blood trickle from some of their noses. My speakers blew, plunging my room into silence. Josh was oblivious in his glaze. I trance. He made a slow, deliberate knocking motion 3 times. Thump. My attention shot to my front door at the thudding sound of the knock. My heart began to race. Thump. The knocking on my door was in perfect unison with Josh's knocking. On screen, a couple of the group in Josh's den scrambled to their feet, freaked out at what was going on. I felt sick. This had gone too far. Thump. I stood up and backed away from the door too. My stairs. No fucking way I was opening that door with the shit I had just seen. I ran upstairs to check on Joni, make sure she was okay. Thankfully, she was fast asleep. I went into my own room and grabbed my baseball bat from my bedroom window. I have a good view of the front door. Sweaty and hyperventilating, I nervously drew back the curtains to look nothing. I grew bolder and took a good look, studying our porch and looking out down the street. Still nothing, but I could feel a presence. That's when I caught a glimpse, a shadowy movement in the trees across the road. It was only for an instant, but I saw that same ominous outline that I had seen in Josh's den. I must have fallen asleep at some point. Mentally taxed from the ordeal, I woke up with my baseball bat next to me. Story 7. The Blue Boy. Zoe. "Come here for a moment, won't you?" shouts the gentle voice of my mother. I pull myself hesitantly away from the picture I'd been drawing, and, a pale hand resting softly on the banister, I made my way downstairs, footsteps silent. "Mama," I call, wondering which room I would find her in. "In here, Zoe," she responds from the kitchen, still clutching a red crayon in my right hand. I push open the door to the kitchen. Warm air hit me, bringing with it the fresh smell of apple pie and cinnamon. "Zoe, honey, this is our new neighbor. He lives just up the road." She introduces me to a boy a little taller than me, clad in blue jeans, blue sneakers, and a blue flannel, blue, so different from the red coloring crayon I still clutched. "His name is Zane. Honey, won't you introduce yourself?" my mother urges, hopeful that I would soon have better company to keep than my worn teddy and a box of crayons. "I'm Zoe," I say blankly, locking eyes with Zane unsurprisingly. His eyes are blue. He smiles a small smile, holding out a hand just as pale as mine. I stared at it, a thought coming to me just then. How had he gotten here? The nearest vacant house was about a mile away, which did actually make him our closest neighbor, as far as I knew, though 8-year-olds didn't walk for miles alone, at least none that I knew, other than Zane. Hesitantly, I place my hand in his and shake it. His smile seems to grow as I do this, but it still doesn't beat my mother's, which had spread quite so far that I feared her teeth would break. She claps her hands together with a finality I hadn't seen before, and has me sit next to him at the table to eat a slice of the pie I had smelled when I first come into the kitchen. He eats quietly, which I appreciate. Other boys at my school liked to chew with their mouths open, smacking their lips together and allowing slobber to dribble down their chins. Zane, though, didn't let any of the disgusting slobber escape his mouth as he chewed with both lips closed, quiet as a bug. "You like red," he says as soon as my mother leaves the room. It was the first time I'd heard him speak. His voice was smooth, I note, smooth as ivory. "And you like blue," I reply as we settle back into a comfortable silence. When we are done eating, my mother ushers us upstairs, giving me instructions to show this blue-loving boy my toys. I obey, showing him my worn teddy, Lancelot, and my favorite box of crayons, and my toy chest of building blocks and other such toys. I showed him my puzzles, which are missing most of their pieces, too. He picks up a blue crayon, the only crayon in the box that was unused. It was a sort of sacred thing, that blue crayon, for the simple fact that it was perfect, sharp, and new. "Can I draw?" he asks. I nod, and we both settle down in the little plastic chairs that lay pushed against the art table. He picks a clean, white sheet of paper from the stack in the middle of the table, and I take one as well. He draws with blue, I roll with red. Though neither of us said very much, I was content in the fact that Zane had quickly become a friend. I felt sad when it was time for him to go home. I watch out the window as he walks down the road, turning away as he disappears behind the copse of trees at the edge of our property. My mother startles me, her cheerful voice loud after the silence that Zane had brought. "Oh, I just knew you two would get along," she says happily. I think she was more excited over Zane coming by than I was, to be quite frank. "You two are so cute together. What did you draw?" she says, picking up the pictures that Zane had drawn with the perfect blue crayon. She smiles in delight at his picture, a drawing of me, all in blue. I myself had drawn him in red. Despite his apparel, oh, these are so precious. He'll come back tomorrow, for sure, and he did. He came back that day, and the day after that, and the day after that. I and think I ever saw his house, or where he came from, as my vision was limited to the pesky trees. It came to a time when he earned the privilege of staying the night over. He came that day with a blue overnight bag, wearing blue pajamas that contrasted greatly to my own red pajamas. My mother even took pictures of us standing side by side, arms slung over each other in a chummy way. "You to see and play outside for a while, but please stay away from the well." We both agreed and went outside. We abided by that one rule for the whole day, and when we sat down for supper our cheeks were rosy red from the cold, the only red I had ever seen on Zane. We ate greedily, nonetheless managing to maintain our table manners, and went upstairs to draw for a while before bed. Zane seems frustrated, excited, and can barely sit still at the drawing table. His restlessness affects me as well. And finally I have to ask, "Why are you so jumpy?" "I want to see the well, Zoe." I blink in confusion. "Why?" I ask. "Because it'll be exciting. It'll be so very exciting. Wouldn't it?" His smile is infectious, soothing away my worries, and soon we are on the stairs and out the door. The cold grass tickles the soles of our feet, and our faces turn red once more. This does not stall our journey to the well, though, because we are young and excited, and in those few rebellious moments we are invincible. Zane puts a finger to his lips, smiling. "Tonight we see the black water of the well in her full glory. She reflects the very sky we stand under," he says grandly. I stare at the well, which I had never paid very much attention to in past years, for the simple fact that my mother had forbidden it. "Do we push it or pull it?" I mutter, referring to the wooden cover that concealed the inside of the well from view. We push it. Both of us lay our pale hands on the cold wooden cover and push with all of our strength until the cover gives, and we are given a clear view of the well's dark water. Zane pulls himself up to the edge of the stone well and begins walking around the rim quickly, gloating. "I am the king of the well, king of the well," he sings, "king of the well, and I'm never gonna fall." He holds out his hand, and I take it as he helps me up onto the edge of the well. "Here is my queen. She's queen of the well, queen of the well, queen of the well. We rule the well, we rule the well, We rule the well, and we're never gonna fall. He sings, I smile, gaining confidence in step. As we dance around the well, he repeats the tune, I am the king of the well, the king of the well, king of the well, and I'm never gonna fall. Ah, he says, releasing my hand as he teeters, attempting to gain balance. He does, and we continue our dance around the well. I go a bit more carefully, but he is intent upon proving to the queen that he is truly the king of the well. I am the king of the well, the king of the well, king of the well, and I'm never gonna fall. Here is my queen, she's queen of the well, queen of the well. We rule the well, we rule the well, we rule the well, and we're never gonna. He totters dangerously, once again releasing my hand. His eyes widen, and I let out a small scream of fear as this time he fails to regain balance. He locks eyes with me, eyes blue meeting red-brown, and he whispers the last word of the song he had created. Fall, and the king of the well falls, leaving the queen standing shocked and afraid and even a little heartbroken. A scream rips through my throat as I reach for him, desperately clasping at his fingers. Zane, Zane, I screech desperately as his fingers pull away the dark K of the well, dragging him further and further away, his terrified screams digging into my heart as they fade into the depths of the well we were supposed to be ruling. My mother must have heard you. For one moment I am alone, and the next she is pulling my terrified self away from the well that my best friend had just disappeared into. Where's Zane? Zoe, where's Zane? She says, shaking me as I babble incoherently. I finally manage to piece together a sentence. The Blue King fell, I say. Then again, I repeat it. Mama, the Blue King fell. Her eyes widen in horror. The police are called. It takes days to retrieve Zane's body from the well, and when I see his body, I laugh. I laugh at the cruel irony given me by the sight of the boy who'd been blue in almost every way. His skin was blue now, too.